Let's go to the wild and wonderful Shetland and Orkney Islands, where I would like to introduce you to the Trows. Given their proximity to Scandinavia, it's not surprising that the Trows of Orkney and Shetland Islands are sometimes associated with trolls of Scandinavia. But before you start imagining Trows as giants striding over hills and beaches, let me tell you that they are far from similar to trolls in appearance.
Once, a girl in a peat hilt saw a little grey woman going wandering as if in search of something, and making a noise like scolding, only she used a hidden tongue. All day she was seen going about the peat banks, and the girls and boys employed there got frightened a little, feeling sure she was no good. At last, about sunset, one resolved to speak to the woman, but it happened that the sun went down as the girl got near enough to address the trow wife. Then something drew the girl's attention another way for one moment, and when she looked again, the creature had disappeared. It is well known, you see, that if the sun rises while a trow is above the grass, he or she has not the power to return home, and is day-bound, and must stay on earth in sight of man till sunset.
When it comes to their appearance, trows are small in size. This is certain, as it is known without doubt that they live underground within the lush green hills, and are seen travelling from one place to another mounted on bulrushes, riding them through the air. Now, how they control the direction of the bulrush is anyone's guess, but I'd be inclined to believe they go wherever the wind takes them. Reports from other sightings tell us that the trow often walk or skip backwards, and what's more, they move smoothly and quickly too. So there you go, they are not large or cumbersome, but they're rather sized for swift movement. And I think this description fits well with all that we know of their character too. Unless you're driving or using heavy machinery, close your eyes a moment and imagine a brownie. Not the chocolate kind, not the yummy kind, the household brownie, short and stocky, a strong, robust sort of creature. Now strip the brownie back to a smaller, spindly body, all arms and legs, you know what I mean? And we're closer now to seeing the trow in our mind's eye. But what about their character? They are fond of music and dancing, and it is their dancing that forms the fairy rings, you know. A Shetlander lying awake in bed before day one morning, he heard the noise of a party of trows passing by his door. They were preceded by a piper who was playing away lustily. Well, this man happened to have a good ear for music, so he picked up the tune that he'd heard and often used to play it for his friends under the name of the fairy tune. There's no follow-up to this account, which suggests that the trows were not unhappy or did not seek revenge on this man for learning their tune and continuing to play it, as we've heard so many other times with other members of the good people. One thing I find most curious about trows is their willingness, or indifference perhaps, at being seen by humans. There are many reports of them out in the open, just doing their thing, not bothered if humans see or hear them. And this suggests that they feel very safe within their hill homes. Well, it's commonly believed that when humans enter a trow hill, they do so through one door and come out another door. So perhaps, no matter where a trow is, they are never really far from a door into their hill homes. And this is maybe what gives them their confidence when around humans. An elderly woman of the island of Yell in the Shetlands once recalled that she met some trow children accompanied by a little dog too, playing just like other boys and girls on top of a hill. Now, these accounts suggest that Trows are not threatened by humans at all. They appear to live somewhat in harmony, assuming a sort of give and take approach to coexisting.
One Saturday night, a boy was sleeping on a shakedown near the fireplace as some unexpected guests had turned him out of his usual place of repose. Now, the Trows require that every hearth shall be swept clean on Saturday night, that no one shall be found near it, and above all, that plenty of clean water shall be found in the house. Unfortunately, all these things had been neglected, so that when the Trows came, they were naturally much enraged, and made such a noise that the boy awoke. What should he see but 2 Trow wives seating themselves not far from where he lay? One carried a baby, the loveliest little creature that was ever seen, only that it had 3 eyes instead of 2, the extra one being in the middle of the forehead. The Trow, who was not baby encumbered, sought for clean water, but alas, found none, and revenged herself by taking the first liquor she came across in a keg. Pouring some in a basin, the Trows washed their baby in it, and then the baby's clothes, and then poured the mess and dirty water back in the keg, saying, "Take that for not having clean water in the house." They then sat down close by the fire, hanging the baby's clothes on their feet, spread said feet before the blazing peats, and dried the garments in that manner. Now, the cute boy who was watching their proceedings knew that if he kept his eyes fixed upon them, they could not go away. Accordingly, he kept staring and listening to their conversation in hopes of hearing something worth remembering. But the Trow wives began to fidget, being desirous of departing before sunrise. And at last, one of them stuck the tongs in the fire and made them red hot. As soon as the tongs became glowing, she seized them, and approaching the boy, pointed a blade at each eye, grinning at him in the most hideous manner, while she brought the hot tongs in alarming proximity to the wakeful urchin's face. Of course, he blinked and screamed, and the Trows, taking advantage of the moment when his eyes were closed, fled.
Well, in fairness to these Trow women, their likely long-standing arrangement with this family in this cottage had been neglected on this particular night. Let's be honest, this could happen to the most well-organised of us, but their reaction to the change in routine is interesting. It was menacing and I think vindictive too. But before you go thinking that Trow women are a complete nightmare, this next account reminds us that the Trows, as with most all kinds of fairy, are not one-dimensional. They are not one thing or another, but rather complex characters, no doubt with all shades of moods and values and favouritism. Take a listen to this curious account from the Shetland Islands as published in 1870. A Shetlander, who is probably still alive, affirmed that he was once taken into a hill by the Trows. Here, one of the first objects that met his view was one of his own cows that was brought in to furnish materials for a banquet. He regarded himself as being in rather a ticklish situation if it were not for the protection of the Trow women by whose favour he had been admitted within the hill. On returning home, he learned, to his great surprise, that at the very moment he saw the cow brought into the hill, others had seen her falling over the rocks to her death. Thankfully for that man, he had been taken under the protective wing, if you like, of a group of Trow women who had taken him to the celebration within their hill home. Now, why they did this, we'll never know, but perhaps they considered it a sort of compensation for having taken his cow. Or maybe they just fancied him. One thing is certain, they didn't borrow his cow. It was seen clearly to have perished, so unlike that wonderful tale about the fairy cow in Ireland, which I feature in a separate episode, these good folk had no intention of returning the cow once their use for it was done. There are so many tales of the Trow that I'd love to share with you. They are such intriguing creatures. We simply must visit with them again, but I have one more tale I have to share with you today, which tells us about a Trow who was singularly well known throughout a particular human community. And it brings to mind the common etiquette used when dealing with brownies.
There was a Trow called Bruni, who was supposed to be king of the Trows. He showed himself very often, and it was remarked if he had been seen in a cornyard, all was sure to be right there. But if the visitant was an ordinary Trow, mischief ensued. Folks were glad when Bruni paid them a visit, and they were very careful not to go anywhere near the corn which he had been guarding, as it was observed that he objected to being overlooked and resented such interference by scattering the corn stacks all about. Bruni seemed to have taken a whole neighbourhood under his protection, and was seen gliding from yard to yard in the cold evenings, casting his spells upon the crops. But the people felt sorry for Bruni, being exposed to the cold night air, so they made a cloak and hood for him, and laid it in a yard which he frequented. Bruni took the well-intended gift as an offence, and he was never seen again.
I think you are going to love next week's video, so make sure you're subscribed and have hit the notifications bell so you won't miss it. And thanks for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!